Welcome back to JK Live. Last night, the Bank of England's chief economist, Hugh Pill, said Brits must accept they're poorer. Otherwise, prices will continue to rise. He said that shopkeepers who up their prices and workers who ask for a pay rise are partly to blame for inflation.
But hold on, the Bank of England has got one job, and that's to keep inflation below their 2% target. Remember, it's currently over 10. And their bond fire sale during the Truss government cost the taxpayer tens of billions of pounds, put up your mortgage and crashed the economy. Surely, they've been asleep at the wheel, haven't they? And joining us to discuss this is the CEO of Fair Money and finance expert, Dr. Roger Gewolb, and Talk TV presenter, Nicola Thorpe. Roger, well, come on.
Good evening.
This is a bit rich of the Bank of England. We've all got to tighten our belts when they've crashed the economy.
Well, I took my breath away, Jake. I don't think they're asleep at the wheel. I think it's a conscious decision, and just one after another of bad decisions. We have cost-push inflation, as a basic economics for dummies textbook will tell you, and that means non-consumer-driven inflation. In other words, it's not consumer spending that's going up, it's materials and services, food, fuel costing more. Can't stop spending on those. People have to eat and they have to heat. Raising interest rates, as they've done 11 times, is the absolute last thing that you do with that kind of inflation. And note that it's done nothing to curb it.
Because in layman's terms, put what they're trying to do by raising the mortgage rates, because they're trying to basically create unemployment to stop us all, am I right, to stop us all asking for pay rises and to stop us spending. It's a rather cruel, blunt method, which isn't going to work while you've got food prices still very high around the world.
Well, that's a great theory. I've heard a number of them, like what they're really trying to do is build up, I'm sorry, Jake, the conservatives are trying to build up a war chest of money to make massive tax cuts before the next general election because their position is so poor at the moment, at our expense. I mean, the last straw, the one that broke the camel's back to me, is Jeremy Hunt proudly of himself announcing that he was going to raise corporation tax by 1/3. Do these folks not realize it's Muggins who's going to pay that? Businesses are going to raise their prices.
You may think that's a terrible policy. I can tell you there is actually a worse policy than raising corporation tax by 1/3, and that's telling people 2 years ago that you were going to do it because businesses have already left the country. But Nicola, who is to blame for this?
Well, I think that you can't get off completely lightly here, Jake. You were in Liz Truss's cabinet.
Maybe I'm to blame, you're right.
No, not you, not solely on your head. But to be fair to Hugh Pill, what he said...
Sort of on his head, though.
Sort of on it, like a little on his head. Like a little bit on your head.
Sensible people like me were not backing Liz Truss.
Yes, absolutely. And to be fair to Hugh Pill, he said in this interview that somebody needs to accept the fact that they are going to be poorer.
Not him, though. He's only 180 grand.
Yes, he is. But what he could do if he wanted to afford things, I believe it was your own advice, wasn't it, Jake? Just get a second job if you can't afford to pay your bill.
No, it wasn't a second job. It was
change your job.
Comparing the economy to how people run their households. But on the issue of second jobs, actually...
She got you there.
You're at yours right now, Jake. You're at yours now.
On the issue of
she got it in first. Yeah.
Surely, you know, if we believe what he says, we should all just be completely depressed that, you know, we're all sort of tightening our belts, going to permanently poorer. But actually, the British people aren't like that. They are the sort of bulldog spirit. They will go out there and get a second job and make Britain better. This is the economic consensus.
Yeah.
It's the sort of globalist point of view. I actually believe in Britain. I think it's a bit of a pity that the Bank of England doesn't follow that as well.
So I'm one of those northern voters that gets spoken about so much, you know, the bulldog, kind of salt of the earth voter. Actually, why on earth should it be working class people who have to pick up the slack? Why isn't it companies like Shell and BP and their shareholders? Why aren't they people?
If I can jump in, it's even richer than that. The Bank of England is the last entity, Mr. Pill is the last person to tell us to rein in spending. I mean, first of all, Andrew Bailey can reduce his 575,000 quid a year, and Mr. Pill can reduce. Let them all start by taking some salary cuts and spending less, because it is they, with their 11 consecutive interest rate cuts, that have caused the inflation, and their QE, their quantitative easing of printing money, those two things are largely what's made us all poorer. I just think it's laughable. Of all people, I'd rather somebody from the Green Party come out and say this to the Bank of England.
Can I just ask you, though?
Yeah.
How should they be bringing inflation down? Because I do think that one thing that Rishi Sunak is absolutely correct about, it is high inflation more than anything else that is making us poorer, particularly food inflation, because that hits the poorest.
Yeah.
And to be fair, he has handed out billions.
Yes.
I mean, both during the pandemic,
Sure.
400 billion more than he wanted to spend, and then a huge amount in the energy packages. Everyone just got a check. 8 million people got a check for £301 this month to help with their fuel prices. So how do we bring
There's
inflation down?
two issues there. The first issue is that cost push, non-consumer driven inflation comes down by itself. It always does. It's going to be 3-point-something% by next winter. It's got nothing to do with the Bank of England or Rishi Sunak or Jeremy Hunt. It's happening in a dozen other countries. In none of them do you see the Prime Minister or the Finance Minister, the Chancellor claiming credit for it. It goes down by itself always. In 2009, under other leadership, the Bank of England left cost push inflation alone. Interest rates at 0.5% for 3 years, it ran itself out.
So you are very against the Bank of England.
They never should have raised
putting
interest rates.
interest rates up. But do you not think, just to extend this a bit, we have had 20 years of unbelievably low, cheap money, effectively. When I first got my mortgage, you had to pay, bottom rate, 5.4%. That's how old I am. It's now getting closer to that again. I personally have thought the last 20 years, I mean, it's been great for a lot of people. They've bought nice big houses, got assets, but it's been kind of madness.
I never
no?
would have imagined you could have been old enough to pay attention to those things at that time. The answer to that is, as Mr. Bailey has been criticized for when he was at the Financial Conduct Authority, he waited too long. By all means, incrementally over a number of years, bring it back up. But to hit British public after Brexit, after COVID, Ukraine war, everything else, with 0.1% to 4.5% in 12 months is sheer insanity. To then double down and pass on a 1/3 corporation tax increase on top of it is madness.
But we were far too slow. We were massively lagging behind the United States. But we love hearing from our audience here on JK Live. Make sure you get on the socials, hashtag JK Live.
You got it in?
We've
Yep.
got James, and he's saying him and his band at the Bank of England are making us all poorer. What a surprise people think that. And I bet that he won't be, I think our famous protagonist won't be any poorer. Emily.
So 35% of our viewers said that Hugh does have a point. And, you know, is there not an argument to be made that actually there are tough times?
Yeah.
We do need to
Of course.
pull our
Some-
belt
some of
in.
us do
And
need
actually
to.
there has been a huge amount of help for those who are really hurting at the bottom. We can't say to the government they haven't handed out a lot of cash in the last 2
Yes.
years to help people, and actually a lot of tax breaks. So isn't it right? I'm sorry, I'm playing devil's advocate here.
You do very well.
That the middle classes and the wealthier do help put more money back into our.
Yes, it should not be the working class people or even middle class people, I would argue,
But I would
who have
argue
to
it's not
accept.
the working class; it's the middle classes who are paying. And unfortunately, as we know, the middle classes, a lot of them are just was what I would term and what Theresa May termed, they're just about managing.
Yeah.
And some of these tax rises, Rishi has.
And it's
put
not
in,
just about-
freezing the tax threshold. That
not-
is really going to hurt.
We
families.
always focus on class. It's not just about class, but about age as well. Somebody of my
Young
generation
families.
or younger will not be able to get a mortgage. Or
Yeah.
say my brother
Yeah.
and sister-in-law, their mortgage payments have gone up by hundreds of pounds. They just had a baby. How are they
That's
supposed
the Bank
to?
of England, isn't it? That
All
is
of
their
the-
catastrophe. When they did the bond sale, the fire sale of bank bonds, people lost confidence in the British economy. They were out of step with the American interest rates, and people just lost confidence.
What are the
That's
Tories
put
doing
that
about
was
it?
put
I know you're
interest
a
rates
Liz
up.
Truss
That's what
supporter.
put interest rates up.
What are
Emily.
the Tories
I know
doing
you're
about
a Liz
it?
Truss supporter. It was Liz Truss that
What-
crashed
what-
the economy.
No, sorry.
What is your
Sorry.
party doing
No,
about
we
it?
have experts on our
I'm
panel.
not
Let's
so
hear-
I'm no
Sure.
expert. I want to ask you, what is the Tory party doing about it? You're talking about the Bank of England. What's your responsibility as the governing party?
Well, look, we're seeing inflation falling. which
But
is
why?
hugely-
How?
By
How are you
itself,
doing
by
that?
itself,
By itself, yeah.
Cost push inflation. When we're not overspending. People are deciding between heating and eating. It falls by itself. Cost push. The price of things comes down. Okay. you know, people are suffering, and raising interest rates does nothing to curb inflation. The other thing they say is, oh, well, we're protecting the pound against the dollar. Well, how's that going for you? It's been 1.5 for so long. We're sitting here struggling at 1.2. The host of a show that I'm on in America took her daughter recently to London for the weekend because it was cheaper than going to Manhattan.
Just because we're about to go to the break, I just want to ask one last thing. What would you like Hugh Pill to get up and say to all of us tomorrow instead of what he said today?
I'm really sorry. We were very wrong to raise interest rates. We're putting them back to 1.5%. We're going to be raising them back up over the next 5 years.
Steadily.
Sorry.
Thank you so
Hardest
much.
word.
Thank you so much for coming on the show,
Thank you.
both of you. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it. Next on Jeremy